Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics here with the Lattice Table Runner overview, kind of a mini tutorial. This is an original design here at Shabby Fabrics where we are able to take actually a small amount of fabrics and create this beautiful kind of ribbon lattice design weaving in and out of the table runner. It's easier than it looks. I want to break that down and show you how it's assembled. Again, it's kind of just more of an overview. Kits are available both in the beautiful blue here, which I just think is stunning, and of course the traditional red. And you know Northcott and their Christmas, there's metallic details. They're just beautiful. Kits will also include a lovely backing, and you will be getting the pattern in your kit. Of course, you can always pick up the pattern, maybe use some fabrics from home. I just think they're extra special in the Christmas Joy fabrics from Northcott. So as we look at our table runner, we basically have two components. Let me go over those. I'm just going to put this to the side, but I'll be bringing this out. It's easier to see the contrast in the blue version than in the red fabrics. You can see here I have a lighter blue fabric that's kind of zigzagging back and forth and a darker blue. On the red, I have a lighter red here and a darker red. Not as much contrast. When they made the red version, it didn't have quite the same depth of difference of color, I would say, the separation of color. It's a little bit harder to distinguish between light and darker red. So if you are picking up the red kit, just be really intentional. One thing that we noted about the darker red is that it has only the gold snowflakes, same with the dark blue. The lighter colored fabric, both in the red and the blue, has the white snowflakes. So that might be a visual marker for you. Maybe you want to label your fabrics lighter red, darker red. However you want to do that, just make sure that you have those absolutely understood. Otherwise, this lattice effect will not happen for you as you put your project together. And I can just envision the perfect Christmas table with this down the center with the beautiful, candle votives and the beautiful dishes. I think it's just a lovely presentation for an elegant Christmas table. So we'll first bring out the fabrics to make this block right here. I want to break that down for you. This is your first block right here. So let's just show you where we're going actually. That might be really helpful. This is the target. Notice our light red, dark red. All right, that's where we're going. How are we going to get there? First off, because it's a lot of precise piecing, if you've watched any of the videos, you know the drill. Get the sizing, get the good thread in the sewing machine, the fresh blade in the rotary cutter, and a fresh needle in the sewing machine, because that's going to set you up for success. Good, clean cuts. 2.5 is a common cut throughout this. I'll just show you what that looks like. This is kind of the block exploded, if you can kind of envision that. That's the block right there before it's sewn together. Every single one of those pieces in there, aside from the middle, was initially cut from a 2.5 by width of fabric strip. That's why this is the MVP of this project for sure. And then once you cut those longer strips and you want to start working with smaller sections, the 2.5 by 12.5, that's the close cousin, Mama Bear, Baby Bear. They worked beautifully for us with that project. And if you really want to just not even have to deal with cutting the 4.5-inch centers, of course you could pick up the Creative Grid 4.5. Totally optional on that one. That's a nicety ruler, not necessarily have the same utility and power of the 2.5-inch, which is really, as you saw, consistently happening. So let me just put those off to the side. We need a lot of room here. And we definitely had some aids on the sewing machine, the diagonal seam tape, my seam guide to keep us true to our 1/4 inch, and of course our patchwork pins to pin everything just so. So let me bring out this next one and I can just show you how this goes together. There's a lot going on the table here. So here's our fabrics right now cut. You're going to start with, let me just move them apart. you can start with the center row and just sewing these 3 together, and I'll just flip these over so you can see how we pressed. So that part is done. For the bottom section, the 3 portions came together, pressing this direction, and then we sewed the red on top to create the bottom portion. So that's taking care of this bottom section. Same up here. 3 go together, sew this on the end. I'll flip that over if you want to see how we press that. Once you have that, as we look at our block, which is right here, once we have this sewn together, in fact, why don't we sew that one? I want to sew that one because I want to sew that side and then we're going to sew that together. The reason I want to sew this with you is it's very tempting to want to sew on the side with no seams. I have fallen for that temptation many a times. And what happened is seams in the back, I had a rolled seam because I couldn't see those seams. So for that reason, I am going to sew from the side where I can keep absolutely every single one of those seams in my view, pin at the top, pin at the bottom, and then maybe a pin or 2 in between. And we're going to keep track of those seams along the way. I've got a seam guide that's going to hold me true to that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now, whenever you have a portion that has this many seams and there's nothing going on, it's very obvious. As I even open this up, the block is wanting to move in that direction. We think that's a pretty good idea. I think my iron cooled down in the midst of getting going here. Yes, I see that it did. All right, no worries. We can let that, that iron needs to heat up. We'll let that happen. We understand though that we're going to press toward this because there's no seams here. Once that is done, let me get myself back to where I need to be here. Our block is here and our block is here, just like that. Now that side piece can come on. Right sides together. Again, looking at this, in this instance, because that seam will be pressed down, I will sew from that side because that's pressing down in the direction of my travel. And then of course we're going to press to the outside, and so we sew this top row to this section, and that's our total pressing there. I want you to be able to see that. You will make 3 of those exactly like that. Let me just get these out of our way. And then comes your sides. So let's just look at that. Just like this. And this is the part where I want to show you again the blue version. So this is us here. Exactly like this, except we're doing the red version. This is another block. These are the side setting sections that we're going to be moving on next, and specifically focusing on this area. So let me just bring that out. It's hard to break it out when it's all sewn together. You're like, I can't see where one block is and the other is not. I understand that. So ultimately, we're going to be making a side kind of setting section. But let's ignore this, and we're going to focus on this for now. You bring out those sections. So this is where we are headed. Again, I know it's hard to break that out. This is our dark red. That's our light red. So let's look at that. Notice how these are 2 dark reds, 1 light red. 2 light reds, 1 dark red. That's what gives the lattice effect. Let's look at the blue, which is easier to look at. Let's ignore this part, right? That's the quilt block we just did. This is the section we're talking about right here. Notice light blue, dark blue, they're opposite. That's what creates the other component to this table runner. That's why this section is dark on that side. That's a dark square, and there's going to be a light square in the middle, right? That's what that's going to produce right there. And the construction, again, very straightforward on that. Of course, sewing these two together, sewing this onto here, sewing this on, and then we're sewing this on the end. That's what you have right here. Once you have that together, side setting triangles come into play. That's this fabric right here. We're going to cut that on the diagonal. I want to do this one with you. This is some sewing I want to definitely do with you. Whenever you cut on an angle, that's bias. That's why using sizing is going to help stabilize this and make this well, less likely to have any kind of distortion whatsoever. So let's look at this. If you can kind of visualize this, these are going to come onto the sides, right? I just wanted to show you what that's going to look like. So let's sew one on here. Sometimes it's hard to just visualize something to get going. That's why we wanted to do kind of more of an overview, not be necessarily sewing constantly, but more just trying to wrap your mind around the construction and how we're getting that lattice to take effect. And let's sew that. So we are here at this point. Now, of course, our other triangle comes into play. Set that right into that corner. Of course, that tip will be jetting off. We'll be trimming some of that away. That's why I'm going to pin here first. So we'll press to the outside again, of course. So now we have the pieced unit together, this section. We've added the side setting triangles. Once you have your blocks, these three, and you have your side setting triangles, one of the things that's easy to get off is actually laying it all out in the end and sewing things together. Now, before I go on too much further, you might have noticed from this point and beyond is well more than 1/4 of an inch. And we all know as quilters that can't be. Or when we add our binding to our runner, these points won't be hitting exactly where they should be hitting. I know you may be tempted, I'm tempted to want to trim that right now, but the pattern guides us into sewing everything together and then trimming that long edge on both sides in the very end. So try to resist that temptation. Once you have your components, I cannot emphasize this enough, that you're referring to your color photo and you're making sure that, okay, if I have my dark red coming here like this, the extension of that has got to be the dark red, not this. That will interrupt the flow of the ribbon. So they're identical. You could easily get this mixed up, or perhaps rotate this block. You see what I'm saying is, you just gotta make sure, especially if you're doing the red one where there's not as much contrast and it's not as obvious, dark red the dark red must be on this side, and the light red here, the light red must be on this side. Here, now, we pin and sew. And of course, it's very important that those line up. There's not a jog. It will be very obvious if this is off, extremely obvious. So the pinning is something, if you pin anything first, it's right here. You're always going to pin those areas where it's really important that those things come out looking just beautifully. And I have one interlocking seam right there. I'm going to take advantage of that. Let's pin that first. And I'm going to pin right here. And I can see now I wished I'd pressed that way to have an interlocking seam. You see that? Hindsight. And now I'm well into the project, but we're going to make it work. And pin down here. Let's sew that. I want to check that point and see if we hit that as expected. Okay. And it's a nice visual continuity there. It just kind of keeps flowing. So let's just press that direction for now. So again, kind of coming back to this. What we would need to do here is sew the other block on that. So if you visualize that, the other block needs to be here in order for me to sew that section to it, and then that section goes together on a diagonal piecing. And that way, if you're going to press that one in that direction, press the seam in that direction for the other, so you get some interlock right in the middle. So this one is one of those ones where it's very easy to get the pieces mixed up, but if you're organized and deliberate, intentional, it'll come out just fine. Be sure to grab those aids that are going to get you good, clean cuts, accurate cutting with the rotary cutter, and of course the ruler on your fabric. And that 1/4 inch seam is going to be really important for you to have all those intersections coming out. But the results are well worth the extra effort it'll take to make this piecing come together just so. So pick up your kits, limited as you know. There's other projects with the same beautiful fabric collection for that whole home look that we love to really celebrate at Christmas time. Thanks for giving me a few minutes of your day. I'll see you soon on another Shabby tutorial.